In October 1987, third-grade teacher Sarah Chen stayed late at Riverside Elementary to prepare for the next day's Halloween party. She never came home. Her car was found in the school parking lot, her apartment untouched, but Sarah had vanished without a trace. For 37 years, no one knew what happened to the beloved teacher who had simply disappeared on a Thursday night. Then, in 2024, contractors renovating Sarah's old apartment building discovered something hidden beneath the bedroom floorboards. What they found would expose a conspiracy so dark it had been buried for nearly 4 decades. Detective Maria Santos had been avoiding the Sarah Chen file for 3 years. Not because she couldn't handle cold cases, but because this one was personal in a way that made her hands shake every time she opened the folder. Sarah Chen had been her third-grade teacher at Riverside Elementary, the woman who'd taught her to read, who'd stayed after school to help with math, who'd made Halloween parties magical with her infectious enthusiasm. Maria was 8 years old when Miss Chen disappeared. She remembered waiting in the classroom that Friday morning, October 16, 1987, wondering why their teacher wasn't there. She remembered the substitute's awkward explanations, the whispered conversations between adults, the way her parents' faces changed when she asked if Miss Chen was coming back. 37 years later, Detective Maria Santos was the lead investigator on missing persons for the Connecticut State Police. She'd solved dozens of cases, brought closure to countless families. But she'd never been able to bring closure to the 8-year-old girl inside her who still wondered what happened to the best teacher she'd ever had. When Tom Bradley called that Tuesday morning in March 2024 about the discovery at 47 Elm Street, Maria felt that familiar tightness in her chest. Another Sarah Chen lead, another dead end. Except this time, it wasn't. Detective Santos, "We found something under the floorboards," Bradley had said. "Personal belongings that look like they've been there for decades. And there's an envelope marked for police." Maria drove to Elm Street with her heart pounding. She'd driven past Sarah's old apartment building hundreds of times over the years, always wondering if the answers were hidden somewhere nearby. Now she was about to find out. The Victorian house looked exactly the same as Maria remembered from her childhood, when she used to walk past it on her way to school. Sarah had lived in the upstairs apartment, and Maria could still picture her teacher's silhouette in the window, grading papers late into the evening. Tom Bradley led her up the narrow staircase to what had been Sarah's bedroom. The renovation had stripped everything bare, exposing the old floorboards beneath decades of carpeting and linoleum. "These boards weren't nailed down like the others," Bradley explained, pointing to a section near the window. "When we lifted them up, we found this hidden compartment." Maria knelt beside the opening, her hands trembling as she pulled on latex gloves. The compartment was small but deliberately constructed, lined with plastic sheeting to protect its contents. Inside was a wooden box that looked like it had once held Sarah's most precious belongings. "Jesus," Maria whispered, lifting out the box. She could feel tears starting, but pushed them back. She was a detective first, a grieving former student second. The box contained Sarah's college diploma, her teaching certificate, family photographs, and letters written in what appeared to be Chinese characters with English translations in Sarah's neat handwriting. At the bottom was a manila envelope sealed with tape, marked in Sarah's handwriting. "Evidence to be opened only by police." Maria's hands shook as she opened the envelope. Inside was a letter dated October 15th, 1987, the day Sarah disappeared. "If you're reading this, something terrible has happened to me," the letter began. "I've discovered that children at my school are being hurt, and the people responsible know I found out. I'm hiding this because I'm scared they'll kill me before I can report what I've learned." Maria sat back on her heels, the letter clutched in her hands. Sarah had known she was in danger. She had hidden evidence, hoping someone would find it someday. Someone like Maria. Miss Chen was trying to protect us, Maria said quietly to Bradley. Even at the end, she was still trying to protect her students. Along with the letter were copies of documents that looked like psychological research files involving elementary school children. Maria recognized some of the names, kids who had been in her class, kids who had suddenly become quiet and withdrawn in those final weeks before Sarah disappeared. Kids like Tommy Rodriguez, who used to raise his hand for every question but stopped talking altogether. Amy Palmer, who started having panic attacks during story time. Michael Chen, who began wetting himself during class after years of being potty trained. Maria had been one of those children. She remembered the strange men who came to take certain kids out of class for special learning time. She remembered how different her classmates seemed when they came back, how scared they looked, how they wouldn't talk about where they'd been. She'd blocked those memories for 37 years. Now they came flooding back, along with the terrible understanding that Sarah Chen had died trying to save them all. Back at headquarters, Maria spread Sarah's letter across her desk and began reading her teacher's final testament. Each word hit like a physical blow, revealing the nightmare that had been unfolding right under their 8-year-old noses. According to the letter, Sarah had become suspicious in late September when she noticed that several of her students were showing signs of severe psychological trauma. Not just behavioral changes, but the kind of deep psychological damage that came from systematic abuse. I started paying closer attention to which children were being selected for the special program, Sarah had written. Tommy Rodriguez, Amy Palmer, Michael Chen, Maria Santos, and 6 others. All sensitive children from families that wouldn't ask too many questions if their kids started having problems. Maria's name on that list hit her like ice water. She had been one of the selected children. Whatever Sarah had died trying to stop, Maria had been a victim of it too. Sarah's investigation had revealed that a man named Dr. Richard Kellerman was removing children from class for what were described as enhanced educational assessments funded by the Department of Education. But when Sarah followed the children one afternoon, she discovered something far more sinister. They were taking the children to a house on Birch Street that had been converted into some kind of laboratory, Sarah wrote. Through the windows, I could see medical equipment, recording devices, and children strapped to chairs, while adults in lab coats monitored their responses to various stimuli. Maria's stomach lurched as fragmented memories began surfacing. The house on Birch Street, the metal chair that was cold against her small legs, the electrodes they attached to her head, the scary pictures they made her look at while they recorded her reactions. The pleasant Dr. Kellerman, who spoke in soothing tones while subjecting children to psychological torture in the name of research. The other adults who took notes while kids cried and begged to go back to their classroom. Sarah had managed to obtain copies of the research protocols, which revealed the true scope of what was being done to the children. The experiments were designed to study how young minds responded to trauma, how children could be psychologically manipulated, and how their natural trust in authority figures could be exploited. They're not trying to help these children learn, Sarah wrote. They're deliberately traumatizing them to study the effects. This isn't education. It's torture disguised as research. The photographs Sarah had secretly taken showed children in various states of distress being monitored by researchers with clipboards. One image showed Tommy Rodriguez strapped to a chair with tears streaming down his face. Another showed Amy Palmer being forced to watch disturbing images while her responses were recorded. Maria stared at the photographs, her own memories becoming clearer. She remembered the fear, the confusion, the way the adults smiled while they hurt her. She remembered being told that this was helping her learn better and that she shouldn't tell her parents because they wouldn't understand the importance of the research. Sarah's letter revealed that she had scheduled meetings with state education officials and the FBI for Friday, October 16th. She was going to expose the entire operation and demand that the children receive proper psychological treatment. "I know they're watching me now," Sarah's final entry read. "Principal Harrison warned me today to stop asking questions. Dr. Kellerman has been asking other teachers about my reliability and whether I might have mental health issues that could affect my judgment. They're planning something. I can feel it. She never made it to those meetings." Sarah Chen disappeared 12 hours later, taking the truth about what happened to her students with her. Until now, Maria immediately called the FBI, but this time she wasn't just reporting a discovery. She was reporting her own childhood abuse and demanding justice for herself and her classmates who had suffered in silence for 37 years. Agent Jennifer Walsh arrived within hours, bringing a team that specialized in historic child abuse cases and government cover-ups. When Maria explained that she had been one of the child victims, Agent Walsh's expression grew grim. "Detective Santos, you understand that this makes you both an investigator and a key witness," Walsh said. "Are you prepared for what we might find?" "I've been preparing for this my whole life without knowing it," Maria replied. "Every nightmare I've had, every panic attack, every time I couldn't explain why certain things terrified me. It all makes sense now. I need to know the truth, not just for Sarah, but for all of us." Using the address from Sarah's letter, they located the house on Birch Street. It had been abandoned since the late 1980s, but a thorough search revealed that someone had tried very hard to erase all evidence of what had happened there. However, they hadn't been thorough enough. Hidden behind a false wall in the basement, investigators found boxes of files documenting what appeared to be the most systematic program of child abuse ever conducted under government auspices. The program was called Project Mindshape, described in clinical terms as a longitudinal study of psychological resilience and behavioral modification in pre-adolescent subjects. The files revealed that Dr. Richard Kellerman was not just an educational psychologist, but a former military researcher specializing in psychological warfare techniques. The most disturbing discovery was a collection of video recordings that had been sealed in waterproof containers. The tapes contained hundreds of hours of footage showing the experimental sessions, documenting in horrifying detail what had been done to Maria and her classmates. Watching those tapes was the hardest thing Maria had ever done as a cop. Seeing herself at 8 years old, terrified and crying while adults in lab coats subjected her to psychological torture, nearly broke her. But it also filled her with a rage that had been building for 37 years. "That's enough," Agent Walsh said after Maria had watched herself being strapped to the metal chair. "You don't need to see any more?" "Yes, I do," Maria said firmly. "I need to see it all, for Sarah, for Tommy and Amy and Michael and all the others. Someone needs to witness what they did to us." The videos revealed that the program had extended far beyond Riverside Elementary. Similar experiments had been conducted at schools throughout New England, all supervised by Dr. Kellerman and his research team. Over 200 children had been subjected to psychological torture over a 5-year period. But the most damning evidence was correspondence between Dr. Kellerman and his superiors discussing the Chen problem and the need to implement permanent containment protocols before Sarah could expose the operation. The FBI's investigation revealed that Project Mindshape had been funded through a classified initiative involving multiple federal agencies. The program was designed to develop psychological control techniques that could be used to create more compliant citizens, starting with children who could be studied over extended periods. Agent Walsh discovered that Sarah Chen had not only uncovered the local operation, but had also identified connections to similar programs in other states. Her investigation threatened to expose a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. The evidence in Sarah's cache included financial records showing the program had operated with a budget of over $30 million. Children had been selected from schools in communities where their trauma was less likely to attract attention. Rural areas, low-income neighborhoods, places where parents were less likely to question authority figures. Dr. Kellerman's research had focused on breaking down children's natural psychological defenses and studying how their personalities could be reconstructed for maximum compliance to authority. The ultimate goal was creating a generation of adults who would never question government directives. The investigation revealed that Sarah had been murdered on October 15, 1987, after hiding her evidence but before she could reach federal authorities. Her body had been disposed of using methods that ensured it would never be found. The murder had been carried out by specialists who eliminated threats to classified programs. The operation was authorized at the highest levels to protect the research from exposure. However, the conspirators hadn't anticipated that Sarah would create such a comprehensive evidence cache, or that one of her former students would grow up to become the detective who would eventually find it. The FBI ultimately identified 12 individuals directly involved in the conspiracy. Dr. Kellerman had died in 2019, but Principal Robert Harrison was arrested at his Florida retirement home. 3 former Department of Education officials faced federal charges, along with several private contractors. The surviving conspirators were charged with conspiracy, child abuse, and murder. The case led to congressional investigations and major reforms in educational research oversight. But for Maria Santos, the real victory wasn't in the arrests or the headlines. It was in finally understanding why she'd spent 37 years struggling with nightmares, panic attacks, and an inexplicable fear of authority figures. "You know what the hardest part is?" she told Agent Walsh as they watched the final arrest. "I spent my whole career trying to save other people's children, never knowing that someone had tried to save me when I was 8 years old." Sarah Chen was finally laid to rest in a ceremony attended by her former students, now adults who finally understood why their beloved teacher had never returned to their classroom. Maria spoke at the service, reading from Sarah's letter one final time. "Miss Chen wrote that she was scared," Maria told the gathering. "But she was more scared of what would happen to her students if she didn't try to stop it. She died protecting us, just like she protected us every day we were in her classroom." The renovation of 47 Elm Street had uncovered more than hidden floorboards. It had revealed a hero's final sacrifice and given her former students the closure they'd been seeking for nearly 4 decades. Detective Maria Santos had solved the case that had haunted her entire career. But more importantly, she'd solved the mystery of her own childhood trauma. Sarah Chen's courage had reached across 37 years to finally set her students free. The hidden cache had preserved more than evidence. It had preserved a teacher's love for her students, a love so strong that it survived death itself to finally bring them justice. The little girl who used to sit in Sarah's classroom had grown up to become the woman who would solve her teacher's murder. In the end, Sarah Chen's final lesson had been learned by the student who needed it most. Justice delayed was not justice denied, and sometimes the greatest acts of love were the ones that took a lifetime to understand. Maria often thought about that 8-year-old girl who used to raise her hand in Miss Chen's classroom, eager to learn and full of trust in the adults who were supposed to protect her. That little girl had grown up carrying invisible scars, never knowing why certain things frightened her or why she dedicated her life to protecting other people's children. Now she knew. Sarah Chen had tried to save her, had died trying to save her, and had left behind the evidence that would finally bring her peace. The forgotten classroom had taught its final lesson, and the student had finally learned why her teacher never came back. The conspiracy had been buried for nearly 4 decades, but love was stronger than secrecy, and truth was more powerful than fear. Sarah Chen's sacrifice had not been in vain. It had saved her students twice, once from continued abuse, and once from a lifetime of never knowing why they hurt. Detective Santos closed the Sarah Chen file for the last time, no longer avoiding it, no longer afraid of the memories it contained. Her teacher's final assignment had been completed, and like all of Miss Chen's lessons, it had been learned with love, courage, and the unshakable belief that protecting children was worth any sacrifice.